This is good. This is giving me confidence to chew your fucking ear off on Saturday when you're fatigued as shit after your solo. I'm like,
put a beer in my hand and I'll listen. Yeah.
I'll get it intravenous going. But it's good to see you, man.
You too, brother.
We're just going to cold roll in. I've noticed you.
You've noticed me?
I've seen you.
From afar?
From
across the room?
I've admired you from afar. That's why I was just sort of waxing lyrical about what do you feel about comics when they respect you, but they want to make a connection, but they, it's all just me paving the way. So you've got a beer in the hand, though, so we've got everything set up.
We're lubed up. We're ready to go.
Ready to go. But, man, honestly, I've come across here. We've gigged together once before, I think. And you've been a presence.
That's right. I already knew who you were, but we hadn't met. And then you said, hey, and then I awkwardly hugged you.
That was great. That's great. Because that's what I want to get to, right?
Yeah.
You just gave it to me right out of the gate. So it was perfect just to get there. I was going to tell you I loved you as I left as well, but then I panicked.
I could see that in your eyes.
Yeah. I was like, should I tell him? Nah, I'll text him. But
I already knew, brother.
You've got a presence, man. And I really enjoyed your online presence as a comedian, everything I share, and just your affable nature and your sort of likability. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know what you're doing. Trauma. There it is. And that's question one. We're getting right into that. No, man, I want to take us back because I think the people who are fans of you and that have sort of seen your meteoric rise over the last couple of years are familiar with a little bit of your history from 2021 onwards. But I want to get into a little bit of the early childhood stuff as well. Like you're one of 5 kids. Born on the 13th of April, 1986.
Wow, you've done your homework.
Sydney, come on now.
There we go.
This wasn't even for the interview. This was just before the green room riff. But yeah, you grew up in Sydney, and tell me what the home life was like. One of 5 kids, man.
Man, it was pretty regular, I guess. I was just kind of a regular middle class upbringing. I'm one of 5. My dad was married previously, so my older siblings are my half siblings, but we all grew up together. Like my dad's first wife is like my auntie. Like my mum and my dad's first wife are best mates.
No way.
Yeah, and so my older brother and older sisters are half siblings, but we all grew up as them being like my full blood siblings, and so we had a pretty happy family.
That's so beautifully harmonious. Like how did that?
It's weird. Yeah.
Yeah. How did that eventuate? And that's it's obviously genuine.
I think it was just because they wanted the best environment for the kids.
Yeah.
Really. So. I was very fortunate. I got to grow up knowing my older brother and sisters, and my dad's first wife was like my auntie. So yeah, it was awesome. They would all be there together at Christmas and any other family events, and we're still all very tight now. Like my mum goes on overseas trips just with my dad's first wife. Like leaves my dad at home, and the girls go on trips.
Do they ever get into in front of your dad, is he doing? Yeah, he's doing that. Of course, just
he's still doing that.
Yeah, he's still doing it, is he?
I haven't noticed him to do anything weird like that.
Right.
But it is weird. The whole thing is weird.
Yeah.
But it's our version of normal.
Of course, and this might be getting too deep, but did that sort of maybe, as you look back now as an adult, did that set an example of maybe life isn't perfect, doesn't work out, but you can still find a beautiful normal? Do you know what I'm saying? I didn't end up with this lady, but we're still close and it can work out.
I think it has definitely helped me, affect me in terms of trying to be mature when you have breakups. So just because things don't work out with one person doesn't mean that they're a fuckwit, right? There has to be animosity there. Just like that didn't work out, that you guys weren't the right match, but you hope that they find happiness somewhere else.
And what do your parents do, career-wise? What's Daddy doing? What's Mum doing?
Well, they're both very old and retired now. But my mum was a TAFE teacher for many years, and my dad was a financial advisor. And before that, he was a high school teacher. He was like a math teacher.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you've come across. Where was I'm trying to figure out where was the comedy influence? One of 5 growing up. Were you the court jester? Were you holding court at the table? What did you have to do? Where was the early memories for you that were formed with stand-up comedy? Do you remember the first time seeing stand-up comedy, just even on the TV?
I used to go to a lot of, when I was 18, I went to a lot of Arj Barker gigs.
Oh, wow.
I think there's a lot of guys.
You weren't too young, were you? You weren't baby age, were you?
No, 18, 19. I remember going to pubs in Sydney and seeing Daniel Towns when he would open for Arj Barker. And I remember telling that to Towns, and he was like, fuck, that would have been fucking 20 years ago now. But that was my first kind of foray into watching solo shows. And then I used to go to a lot of the Sydney Comedy Festival galas and that kind of stuff. And then as I got older, I'd go to a lot of the comedy gigs in Surrey Hills, which is where I was living, and I just loved it. And I would always write down jokes in my phone and just ideas, but I never looked into where you would do an open mic comedy night or really sat and thought about why I'm writing those down. It
Yes.
just was just like, I just thought of something funny, I just write it down. I don't know why.
So there was some instinct there, though. There was
Yeah.
something you're like, I'll share this with the lad. Did you share? Obviously, you know, Australian male, you're joking around with the mates, but would you ever elevate that beyond just banter with the boys? Was it ever like, what do you think of this, though? You
Nah,
know?
never.
Right,
Never.
okay. So it's just sitting dormant in the phone.
Yeah. Yeah, for a long time. I never really thought about what that was or why I was thinking about that until I was in jail. And then I started thinking about what I would do if I could start my life over.
Yeah, because I want to get into that. Obviously, touching base on that, just more the mindset that you were in at that point. So
Yeah.
I know that in interviews previously you've said that, you know, because you felt like you'd lost everything, you were unafraid to take a chance on stand-up comedy, which is a beautiful perspective. I think that people can take a lesson from. But was it as cognitive as that at the time, or were you just like, fuck, I need to find some humour in this situation?
No, it was as crystal clear as that. It was, if I could start my life over, what would I do? And the one answer was stand up.
Wow.
It wasn't let's try and find something funny about this situation. It was, I'm going to get out and start doing open mic comedy nights and start doing stand up. It was just so specific, and there was no other thing in the head.
Yeah.
It was just that.
And how soon, once you get out of prison, do you sign up for your first open mic?
Well, I was under house arrest when I first got bail, and so I wasn't allowed to leave the house unless I was in the company of my parents. And I think I started listening to just comedy podcasts, including, funnily enough, Anthony Vicasio's podcast. He's here today.
Just for the listeners, he's just there.
Yeah, he's right there.
He hasn't died. We're not
he
sharing
had a
that,
brilliant podcast called The Hack Pack, where he interviewed Sydney comedians about how they got into stand-up. And I found that so useful in terms of just hearing about how guys made their start. And so I was just researching like a whole bunch of podcasts and reading about it. And then I started getting ads. I got an ad on Facebook for the Raw comedy competition. And so I was like, fuck it. Well, there's the sign from the universe to do this. So I signed up for that. And then I got given a heat. And then I was like, well, fuck, if I'm going to do this, I better start going to some open mic comedy nights to just practice before I embarrass myself on stage at the Comedy Store. So I started going as much as I can. But originally I had to bring my mum along to the open mic comedy nights.
Because of the conditions of the bail.
Because of the conditions of bail.
So
my
she's there.
first open mic night, my first open mic night was like the 27th of January. It was like the day after Australia Day.
Everyone's nice and hungover, perfect.
And it was, the 27th of January, 2022. Yeah, that's right. And I had to bring my mum along, and I was just like, sign up, put your name in a bucket. And then I got drawn out like really late. And I was like, oh, hey guys, like I have to be home for my curfew.
Yes.
Can you put me on earlier?
Yeah.
And they're like, who the fuck is this guy?
Yeah.
And so I had to be like, oh, I have a court-ordered mandate that I have to be home by 10.
That's how you make an impression on a booker, right? You're like, no, you've got to rearrange this,
So
dude.
they thought it was hilarious. So they're like, yeah, dude, we'll put you on earlier. So then they, like a bunch of guys that I became friends with, got told that they were getting bumped because I needed to go on before them because I had to be home for my curfew.
The good thing is that most comics are cowards. So if anyone's getting bumped, they're like, who the fuck has bumped me? They're like, it's a bloke. He's on house arrest. He's got to get up. They're like, oh my God, please.
They were like, oh, that's hilarious. I got to go see this fuckwit. Yeah.
Yeah, great, man. And do you remember that early set when mum's in the crowd, you're getting early? Do you remember what the jokes were around?
Yeah, it was a lot of ones that I ended up using like in my raw set. Like the jokes still worked like from the get-go, but I was just so nervous. I wasn't performing at all. I was just saying the words.
Yeah.
And like when you get up to do a gig for your first time and you haven't got to a punchline there, you're just listening to silence because they're just listening for a punchline.
Yes.
And so when you're hearing the silence and you're not used to it, you're like, I'm bombing, I'm dying, everyone hates me, I suck. And then you say a punchline and you get a laugh and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
That feels fantastic.
That's
I've got to
so
keep
good. So you get the early feelings, you get the early bug, you get that encouragement. I mean, that's in 2022.
Yeah.
We're only in 2024, Andrew. Here you are. So it's like, how quickly did you start working? How obsessed were you with this? And were you just starting to write and keep turning over? Because for most people, you know, the process is they start with the open mics. They maybe get a good 5 minutes if they can build that. Then they maybe move to 10s. Then they're getting paid for a club set. Maybe they do 10. You know, and it's like, but you seem to have blasted through it.
I was going to about 5 or 6 gigs a week every week. I think I did my first year. I did like 260 gigs in the first year. And I was going to all these open mics every night of the week, with the same guys, right? And so I realized very quickly that they weren't going to laugh much because a lot of these open mic gigs, there's no audience. It's just other open micers.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, no, if I say the same shit every night, I'm not going to get the same laughs. So I started doing like a new 5 4 nights a week.
Wow. And just turning it over.
For a lot of it. Just turning it over, just to test stuff out. Because it was the only way I felt like I could get a laugh out of these guys.
Yeah, they're the only audience there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was for the first like few months. I was doing like a new 5 every night. Most of it was dog shit, right? But and I
still so courageous.
But
a new 5, dog shit. Who cares? It's like a new 5.
But it was so much fun, and it felt like it was a better challenge. And I was so excited to ride, and I was so excited just to get more confident at performing, and also like sit in like, you know, if one joke sucks, just jump to the next one, and then if one's working, making it better, or if one's not working, can you fix it, or is it just dog shit, and should you drop it entirely?
Yes.
All this stuff. I was just you're learning so much so quickly because you're throwing yourself into the deep end.
Yes, and just going. How did you navigate? Because I can connect to that fact of when you're fresh, you don't know the rules yet, so you're just operating on instinct, which is where you want to be all the time.
Yep.
Right. If your instinct's good, but you're writing 5s new, and then at what point? Did you ever come up where you can't write anymore, and then you're scared to do new, and maybe comics telling you, nah, do your goal, do your bangers.
Fortunately, I was going well enough, quickly enough, that people vouched for me that I was able to go to better rooms where there was an actual audience. And then at that point, you stop doing new 5 every night, and you start trying to just refine the stuff which is working, and you know, trying to level up continually on that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's when I started writing a lot less and just trying to work on the shit that I had.
Yeah, great.
And so that was the next challenge, and that was awesome.
And what does that process look like for you, man? Because you are such a creative person. If people, you know, I've got you on the social medias, they see that, you know, it's not only stand-up, but you've got these incredible clips that you do with another comedian. I'm always terrible with his last name, Alex.
Alex Milinkovic.
There you go. I won't even attempt it, but a good man. And you've got this
Say it.
Great Milinkovic. There you go. Take that, Alex. But you've got this great format, and I reached out to you about it because it is one of the greatest things comedically on the internet today that I really love.
Thanks, man. That's very nice.
This entrepreneurial parody, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's just so fantastic. And one thing that I'm so ethereally jealous about is that some people don't understand that it's a parody, and they are getting upset with you in the comments. But then you've got this community where people who do understand it's satire are friends with you, laughing at the people who don't get it. And I was sharing it with comics in the green room. I'm like, Andrew Hamilton, look at this. He's got people getting mad at him for satire, and then he just comments, loser mentality. Or like, you'll never own a Fortune 500 company. And I'm like, this is so creative, and it transcends just, you know, telling jokes on stage. So my question really is it's like, in your writing process for stand-up, what does that look like? Because you're doing so many different avenues.
That's a good question. I don't really know the answer. I really just started doing that because I saw so many of these alpha bros with podcasts, and you should have to have a license to do a podcast these days. That I was like, they're just saying absolutely nothing. Like, I just got so sick of watching guys talk about keeping your circle small, and I was like, that's so idiotic, and it doesn't mean anything. So I was like, it's funnier if I say that's an old mentality. These days, you want to keep your triangle medium. Yeah, and so that was like the first idea I had, and then I was like, well, I'll just go through all these alpha bro podcasts of all the advice that they're giving, and just try and say the opposite. Like,
see, but even that, you're putting in work. You're not just, you know, it's not a flash in the pan for you. You're going through Alpha Bros podcast. You're taking note. You're like
doing my homework.
Yeah.
And then when you hear the haters hating on you, like it's funny to remain in character instead of being like, oh no, you're a dickhead. No, to just be like, good luck being a billionaire with that attitude, like loser mindset, that kind of stuff. It's much funnier.
It's so much funnier, man.
And then they get angrier, and then they argue more.
And the algorithm boosts it more. It's
and
fantastic.
So I find if you can get half the people to hate on you and half of them to get that it's satire, then it just blows up the algorithm because all these people are arguing, and then that's just liquid crack
it's just so fantastic
for the algorithm. But yeah, that's just, I think these days, it's, if you want to be doing well at stand-up, you can't just be doing stand-up, like unless you're a real freak at it, like Dan Rath or something like that. I think that you need to be looking at ways to create a digital relationship with people comedically, whether that's sketches or podcasts or coming up with the next idea. I don't know what that is, right? But I think you need to have all these touch points, because someone might come and see you do live stand-up once a year, twice a year max. But the rest of the time, they may want to just check in with what you're doing from a comedy perspective. And so that's why things like, podcasts and sketches and all that kind of stuff are so valuable. And so I try to figure out the best way to try and do easy wins with that kind of stuff. So for that stuff I do with Alex Milinkovic, we'll write 16, 20 ideas, and then we'll go rent a studio for 2 hours and pump them out, right? And then we can put them out a couple of times a week. And it's just a low-cost, easy win on an idea that goes pretty well.
Oh, it's great, man.
Right? So I try to... Yeah, I'm lazy. I try and find like the low-hanging fruit for now, and then when I have enough money, I'll throw it at some bigger ideas. But for now, that kind of works.
It's so funny because we talk about this format of making fun of these bros, but that's actually incredible advice. Building this digital relationship, you know what I mean? That's not satire. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think I wanted to touch on just quickly as well the community, just with comedy, because I know again you mentioned in the past that everything you went through with your prison time and stuff like that. Naturally, when you go through something like that, your community might fall off, or at least it's reshaped. And then with the comedy community, you again have sort of built relationships around that. So talk me through what that's been like as well.
Well, I was very popular when I was a drug dealer. And then really when I went to prison and I lost all my money, not many people picked up the phone.
Yeah.
A lot of my best mates weren't there anymore. So I found when I started doing stand-up, it was just a lot of... I think if you spend your nights going to open mic comedy nights or even book gigs where you're earning fuck all and you're doing this most nights of your life, there has to be something wrong with you, right? And so I think I have something wrong with me as well. And so I found those guys to be kindred spirits. And so I found generally around Australia comics to be such giving souls because of that reason, right? If you're doing that, you must believe something about comedy, which is that there's something magical about laughter. And I feel that. And I think most of the comics, there are obviously there's some miserable comedians that you're like, what? Why are you even in comedy, right?
Yes.
I'm like, but for the most part, I'm like, these guys are such giving souls that believe what I believe, which is about the power of laughter, and that's cool. And so I find even if I have nothing else in common with someone, I have that much in common, and that's enough to be able to get on with them. And so I've made so many treasured friendships through comedy, and now I get to travel around doing gigs all over the country with people that I think are absolute legends. And that's like I'm living my dream life.
That's awesome, man. That's beautiful.
Sick.
That's beautiful, man. And is there any advice from someone who was in your position at the lowest point mentally, possibly, to now, like you said, living your dream?
Yep.
Like, your journey is your journey, and what you did is going to look different to someone else's situation. But is there a concept or a piece of advice that you would give someone who is at that point where they're like, if I could start all over again, what would I do?
I mean, I have spoken to a lot of people. I used to do a podcast where I talk to people about times when they have crisis points in their lives and how a lot of people don't have this moment where they turn shit around until it all goes to shit. And so I think a lot of people that go through that worst moment in their life are actually more fortunate, right? Because sometimes it all has to go to shit for you to have a think about what do you want to get out of life, and then actually think, okay, well, now's my moment to start doing something about it. The reality is most people don't have the moment where things really, really go to shit, right? They usually just have a life which is like, okay. And then they get to 80 and they're like, fuck, like, it was all okay, but it was never remarkable and it never really was that shit.
Yes.
And because of that, they never really did anything. They look back at their life and go, that was totally unremarkable and I regret never taking those risks.
Yes.
So all I hope is that that people don't have to go through the pain of whether that's, a death in the family or going to prison or like, it all just a horrible divorce and like all these kind of things that got an absolute clusterfuck to have that conversation. I think if you can have a totally average, unremarkable life and still ask yourself, what do I want to get out of this? Then you'll probably know. And then you got to ask yourself, do I have the balls to do something about it to get there?
Yes.
And unfortunately, a lot of people have to go through the shit to actually push themselves to do it.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. Honestly, that's great. And I'm going to look at I look at myself being like, my girlfriend, she's killing my ambition. She's so lovely to me. God damn it. You know what I mean? I got to blow my life up to get this.
Fuck
this
your
thing
life
going.
up, brother.
Yeah, that's the way. No, it's a beautiful message, man. Thank you so much for sharing that. Your first solo was jokes about the time I went to prison.
Yes.
You're now doing a shit bloke.
Yes, I am.
You got around with that, and you got to show. This won't be out in time to promote that show, but
That's
tell us.
fine. When will this likely come out?
Well, I'll be cracking the whip on young Josh Durkin, so we're probably going to get out.
Josh, when is it?
2 weeks.
Sick. Okay, so I have a book coming out at the end of July.
Amazing, man.
And then I'm doing a national tour of my original show, my prison show, that will be touring around the country in August.
And where can people find you on the social medias?
Andrew Hamilton Comedy or Andrew.hamo on TikTok.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for chatting to us, bro. Appreciate it, and look forward to more hangs.
My pleasure. That was fun.
Boom. Nailed it, bro.